today. We're on principle number 6, which is, there's a couple of principles that are quotations, and this is one of them. This is a very short one. Principle number 6 says, all men are created equal. Where's that from?
The Constitution.
Declaration of Independence. That's right. And this is, you remember, one of the things that the founders strongly believed in. And but when you say all men are created equal, what kind of a statement is that? Let's talk about this equality of mankind. Really, as Jefferson says in the Declaration, this is one of the concepts, this equality of mankind, that Jefferson says is a what? What kind of a truth? A what? We hold these truths to be self-evident. It really was for the founders a self-evident truth. What does that mean? When something is self-evident? So obvious? You don't have to debate it. You accept it and you move on. It's a self-evident truth. Well, I ask you the question, is it true and is it a self-evident truth that we're all equal? Are we all alike?
No.
What's the difference between equal and alike?
Equal or treated equal, and alike or just...
When we're talking, very good, when we're talking about equality, we're talking about being treated equally. When we're talking about being alike, oh my goodness, we could talk about a lot of things, even to the point of saying that no two people on the earth are alike, right? Is that a fair statement? No two human beings are alike. But when it comes to equality, as Katie said, we really are talking about being treated equally. And so it can be said that we are treated equally in 3 ways. Let's name them. From your studies, we are equal in the sight of the Creator, right? We are equal in the law, and we are equal in our rights. As human beings, we all have the same rights, and sometimes you'll hear people talk about different classes of rights, minority rights, women rights, goes on and on. But really, as human beings, we all have the same rights. Now let me ask you this question. How are we unequal? Can you name some ways that we're unequal? You know these. Wealth. Height. Size. Hair. I mean, could you go on for a long time talking about the hundreds of ways that we are all unequal, right? And it's kind of interesting. Isn't it glad that we're all unequal? Isn't it great that we're all unequal? It would be pretty boring if we were all exactly the same, wouldn't it be? So, in 3 ways, Jefferson said we are entitled to be treated equally, but in every other way, of course, we are unequal. I want you to turn to page 104 and look, let's read little John Adams down at the bottom of 104. When he was in France, he wrote about some of the French philosophers. Here's what he said. That all men are born to equal rights is true. Every being has a right to his own, as clear, as moral, as sacred as any other being has. But to teach that all men are born with equal powers and faculties, to equal influence in society, to equal property and advantages through life, is as gross a fraud, as glaring an imposition on the credulity of the people as ever was practiced by monks, by druids, by Brahmins, by priests of the immortal Lama, or by the self-styled philosophers of the French Revolution. And there were several, among whom were, who are we talking about here? Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And so Adams was saying this philosophy of Rousseau, which was one of the philosophies that precipitated the French Revolution, is that we are all equal in every way. Did you get that from what he said? Equal in powers and faculties, equal influence in society, equal property and advantages through life. Well, if you believe that, then what would you say the purpose of government should be? I mean, if we really are to have everything equal, then the purpose of government would be to what? Take from those who have and give to those who have not, to make everything equal. What is that? That's leveling. The founders called it leveling. Really, it's a form, or it is socialism. And you have different types of socialism. Communism is a type of socialism. Socialism, and we'll learn this a little later, is defined as government control or ownership. Ownership or control of all the means of production and distribution. Well, under that, you have what forms then of socialism. Communism, which is the most tyrannical, the most revolutionary, the most forceful. You have other types of socialism, which are fascism, very good, Nazism, and there's a few other isms. But this is all under the realm of socialism, and that is what Rousseau is purporting that's the way it is. And John Adams says, let's not go down that line. So he declared that we should all be equal in every way. And of course, if you believe that, then you vote in the type of government that will enforce that. And but let's talk now about what the founders believed to be these equal rights. On page 105, you have a listing there of some examples of what it means. Have you ever thought what it means to have equal rights? Let's just read a few of them. For example, at the bar of justice, to secure their rights. Okay, in other words, before the law, if you're hauled into court, you should have the same protection of your rights as the President of the United States. Right? At the ballot box, to vote for a candidate of your choice. At the public school, to obtain an education. At the employment office, to compete for a job, and so forth. At the pulpit, to enjoy freedom of religion, so forth and so on. There's lots of rights. And notice that the founders would say, we have an opportunity, or we should have an opportunity, to have those things. That doesn't mean that we're all educated the same and so forth and so on. We have an opportunity. That doesn't mean that everybody has to make the same amount of money. No, but we have an opportunity to do if we really want to. That's really what we have a right to. Everybody see that? The opportunity. Okay, so we say society guarantees an opportunity to acquire these things. Let me ask you this question. We'll read a quote at the very end of the lesson. If that's all society does, if that's all government does, is protect your right to an opportunity, what will that mean? Some will and some won't do. Some will prosper, some won't. Right? Do you understand that? Okay. Equal rights does not guarantee that we will have these things. Only an opportunity to have them if we want to. So this brings us to a discussion of an interesting thing that we all hear about, and that is the subject of minorities. I want to ask you here, how many of you belong to a minority? One? You belong to a minority? Belong to a minority? Minority? You belong to a minority? Do you? You don't know? Well, all right, let's ask this question. What is a minority? Who is a minority? It really depends on what you're talking about. You know, are you, what school do you go to? Are you a minority because you come to Heritage? You are a minority. Okay, who do we have here with blue eyes?
I might have blue eyes.
What do you mean you might? Don't you know? Oh, it changes every day. Okay. All right. Brown eyes. I'm one. No brown eyes? Two. We're in a minority. Right? You enjoy the minority of brown-eyed people? Okay. See what we're talking about here? The people you associate with. Your religious affiliation may be a minority. I mean, there's lots of color of your hair. There's lots of ways to be a minority. And what we conclude really is that everyone belongs to a minority. But normally we refer to minorities in regards to what? Race or ethnic group, right? Are you a minority in your ethnicity? Your ethnic group? You're not? Perhaps in today's time, perhaps in the place where we live, you aren't. But if you lived somewhere else, or maybe even here in a different time, could you have been a minority? Oh, yes. What do you have to conclude? Really, that every ethnic group was once a minority. Do you agree with that?
Well, depending on what area you're in.
Yeah, it does. Why do we have so many minority ethnic groups in America? Because America, what? Attracts minorities, doesn't it? Was any of you with me at Statue of Liberty last year? Nobody? Do you remember the famous saying by Emma Lazarus that's on the Statue of Liberty? Any of you know this? You will as soon as I say it. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. What's she saying in that poem? The Statue of Liberty is welcoming particularly who? People in foreign lands who have been what? Oppressed, couldn't enjoy freedom, couldn't enjoy property rights to their fullest. You people who have yearned for that, you come over in a free land. And boy, that attracted a lot of them, didn't it? Freedom does that. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And that's what basically America was made of. America attracts minority. What is there about America that attracts minorities? One word. Freedom. Freedom. And in America, you may come as a minority. But if you have time and patience, you will rise to what? First-class citizenship, right? Because everybody can do it. First-class citizenship. So we're going to talk about that. What does it take to rise from a minority where you may be still deprived of some things to first-class citizenship in America? What does Dr. Skousen call that in the book? Crossing the culture gap. Let's identify some things that a person has to do to cross the culture gap. What's the first thing? What would you say?
Learn the English language.
You got to learn the language. Learn the English language, crossing the culture gap. And why is that important? Crossing the culture gap. Why is it important to learn the English language?
You could survive in America.
Have you noticed how we've kind of yielded on that a little bit?
Yeah. No, we have Spanish now and all the
Right. Around where we live, official things are printed in English and Spanish. And some laws say you even have to hire school teachers to be bilingual, and you even have to have children come to classes that teach English as a second language. What's the best way to learn a foreign language?
To go to the country.
Just dive in, inclusion. But somehow we've bought into this idea that, you know, if we want people in America to learn, we have to teach it in their own language. And so when you get a ballot in the mail or a prospectus or some legal description of some candidates that some put out, you see it's always in our area anyway, English and Spanish. It takes a lot of taxpayer money. See, the founders would say, you want people to cross the culture gap, you require them to learn English. Okay? So, what's another one? What would be another one?
Get a job.
Get an education. Well, why would you want an education to be a first-class citizen?
Because a first-class citizen needs to do things, not just sit around.
That's correct. Because of this next one, you must become economically independent. We don't want people here who are always dependent on somebody else for a living when they're able to earn a living themselves, right? In America, we do not believe in living off the sweat of another man's brow. We tried that once. That's miserable. Everybody needs to stand on their own 2 feet. Be economically independent. Those are the kind of people we want to have as first-class citizens. Okay? You become a social asset. You make contributions of time and resources to your community. You do things to better your community. Become a social asset. Let me ask you folks, does all this take time? Oh yeah, and takes patience. Great deal of time and patience. How much time do you think it does to do all this?
A generation.
Just one generation, you think? Some would take 1 generation. But there are others that have taken 2, 3, 4 generations. But by that time, you should pretty well be assimilated into the American culture. Now, let's talk about this nation of minorities that we've mentioned.